everyone, today I am super blessed to be able to interview the amazing author Elaine Forrestal as part of Booktoberfest 2020. Elaine is a super famous author who has published 18 books in various genres and for all different ages, so she's very talented to be able to write in all these different styles. I find Elaine to be an inspirational author because of how she shares her knowledge and passion about history. And talking about Goldfields girl in particular, I love how she didn't shy away from showing what the sexism and racism was truly like in Australia in the 1890s. Because I believe if we can't acknowledge these harsh truths, how can we ever learn from them? Goldfields Girl is Elaine's latest book to be published. It's only just been released this year as a middle grade book, but I believe that teens and adults will love this too. I certainly do. Thank you so much for letting me grill you. Are you ready to get started?
Yes, I'm ready.
If you grew up in 1890s, just like when Goldfields Girls take place, what would be your ideal job and why?
Well, when I was at school I wanted to be a nurse, and I always lived in the outback sort of towns, so in the small country town where I lived, there was an opportunity for kids to become Red Cross volunteers. And so I thought, oh, this will be cool. I wear a red cape and a nice white cap, and me and a few of my friends would go every Thursday afternoon to the local hospital, and we would roll bandages and we thought we were very important. And then my mother said to me, "You will never make a good nurse." And I thought, oh. And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, you've got endless patience for writing stories, making them up and, telling them and everything, but you don't have much patience for sick people." And so I thought, well, that's because my two brothers are always breaking arms and legs and having blood noses, and I'm often in a position where I'm the one that has to clean them up. So yes, that put paid to that really. I thought, well, I might as well concentrate on writing stories.
Well, I think it's good that you had a childhood dream. Like, everyone has that. Everyone has like, oh yes, I want to be that. That's pretty bad.
Mainly because of the red cape, I think.
Well, I mean, a cape. Capes are awesome.
Yeah, a cape is awesome, especially a red one.
Yes. How did you feel about writing all the sexist and racist parts in Goldfields Girl? Some of it felt quite intense reading it. I'm sure it must have been quite difficult.
I think when you're writing about things that have happened, real things that have happened in history, you just have to grit your teeth and do it, because I can't not be honest with my readers. So yeah, wherever I can, I have to just write it and not pull any punches. I hate trying to, people, when I'm reading something myself, I hate it if the author is, sliding around the difficult bits.
Pandering,
yes.
Yeah.
So I just have to, as I said, grit my teeth and go for it.
Yeah, because it is hard to think this stuff really happened, but yeah, I think it's really important that you wrote in this, because everyone needs to know that this is what really happened.
And everyone's so much more aware of it now than they used to be.
Hopefully, equality.
Hopefully, yeah.
You must have spent so much time researching while writing Goldfields Girl. How long did it take you and how did you find all this rich history?
Well, the time that the book took was about 4 years, which is a bit longer than most of mine, except my historical ones do take longer than my straight fiction. But you can't really quantify the time that you spend researching, because you can't just sit down and do the research all at once. You do some research, you've got an idea in your head about what character you want to write about, but then you have to research not just the character but everything else in the world around them as much as you possibly can to get a whole picture of how they lived and what concerned them and what did they eat, and what sort of work did they do, and what sort of equipment did they have back then. And that's been fascinating with the Goldfields girl, because the equipment for mining, they just invented it as they went along. And,
the claim pegs, and they would just write on pegs and just put it in.
And the Coolgardie safe. Do you know about the Coolgardie safe?
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's built on the same principle as some of the modern day air conditioning units. It works on the evaporation system, but they just made them out of boxes and bits of tin and Hessian bags, and they just invented them. They made them up. They needed them. My father used to have a saying that went, necessity is the mother of invention. Certainly the necessities out there in the middle of the desert came up with a whole lot of inventions. Like the Slugaphone over here was invented to make music, because there's no TV, no radio, no Spotify or internet or anything.
Yeah.
And it was a long, hard day if you're out there in the goldfields digging and breaking up rocks and all of that.
Just trying to find a little bit of gold.
Yes, just trying to find, and maybe you wouldn't find any at the end of the day. And so they'd go to the pub and they'd sing and they'd tell stories and they'd make music with whatever instruments they could find or make. They used to make box drum things too. What were they called? Tea chest bass. A tea chest bass was just a tea chest with a bar up here like this, and you just beat it like a drum. So you held the bar and you beat the chest.
That's so genius.
Yeah, they were really inventive, creative, you might say.
I could honestly sort of not relate to Clara anyway, because I'm nearly her age, and I'm just wondering, was it normal for girls to leave home at 14 in the 1890s?
Well, that was the 1890s, remember, and not only girls left home at 14, boys were out working at 12 sometimes, because the education was not compulsory and sometimes not even available. So a lot of the time they were just running around, as kids they were looked after by the older kids, and then while their parents were out working in the fields and whatnot. And as soon as they were strong enough, really, they were turfed out to help with all the jobs that had to be done on the farms or in the mines or in the factories. Even today, there are kids in some Asian countries who are working in the factories long before they're 14. You dread to think how young they are, but I've seen pictures of them and they're way younger than 14. So, it wasn't unusual, and at least Clara got to choose to do it, and her mother let her do it. So, that was one of the interesting questions that I found amongst the interesting questions you asked me. That was one that I was particularly intrigued by, because I was just totally unaware that you would think that you would find that a barrier to the story, because you're the same age as her, and yet here she is, she's off on her own working in the pub.
We are working in a pub with a bunch of old
prospects. That's right, working in a pub, a very rough pub at that. Yeah. I mean, Mr. Wisdom looked after her, and so did Mrs. Fagan, but she was up for it. She was strong, she was independent, she was capable of doing the cooking and the cleaning and all that. She'd done that growing up all her life, really, helped her mother and her father and whatnot. And so, for her, it was an adventure and something she wanted. She wanted that control over her life, and we all do,
Exactly. You always get to that point where you're like, I really want independence.
That's right, yes. I want to make my own decisions, and Clara was no different.
And she just wanted to have that a bit earlier on in life.
Well, yes, and I think for her era, probably her sisters did much the same, because her older sister went from Queensland to Western Australia to that outback town of Southern Cross when she was married by then, but she was not much older. She was about 16, 17.
I could never imagine being married at 16.
No, neither can I.
No.
The last
No.
thing, and it was really the last thing Sarah wanted to do, but she did fall in love, and she wasn't even sure she was in love at first, but yes.
Yeah.
Then I can't give away the
Tragic ending.
the tragic bit. Yeah, I think it has a happy ending.
It does. It has a little bit of a happy ending
Yeah,
after
yeah.
the tragedy, but
After the tragedy.
I've always found that was the nice because it's like,
Oh,
and then it's
thank
like,
goodness.
yeah, it was like, woo, she got a good ending.
Yeah.
That's
No,
good.
and I think that was important in terms of the
Yeah.
honesty, and in terms of letting kids and teenagers and adults know that there is a way through that tragic time of your life.
I always found that was a very inspiring ending.
Oh, thank you.
How did you cope writing about Clara being married at 16 and these old men wanting to be with a 14-year-old girl? I always like, did you have anyone to offload the outrage that was probably building up onto? Because as I was reading this, my mum got the brunt of that. I felt very sorry for her, but I was kind of offloading it all onto my mum.
Well, lucky you had your mum.
Yeah,
No.
did you have anyone that?
Yeah, I do. My husband is always very supportive when I'm writing, and he always wants to share. He wants me to share with him, but I won't let him read it, not until it's got covers on and it's totally finished, because he used to be an English teacher and I don't want him putting commas where I don't want the commas.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
no, Peter is very good about that, and then of course as a reward, once it has got covers on, he's always the very first reader.
Oh, I think that's really nice. Very supportive.
Yeah, he is. He's very interactive in that way. Very good.
It's really cool. Out of all the books you've ever written, which one was the most challenging to write and research?
I think this one, Black Jack Anderson, was probably, I mean, Clara was challenging in a different way, but with this one, Black Jack Anderson, he was Western Australia's only pirate. I don't know whether you've read about him, but because he was a pirate, he was always concealing himself and, you know, carrying on with what he wanted to do, but never leaving behind too much evidence, or never leaving behind much paperwork. In fact, no paperwork from him himself, but some of his pirate crew who came and went from time to time, some of them have shown up in what are they called, census, in the census, the very first census we had. And so I loved writing it. It was very exciting to write, but again, that's an interesting question, because I haven't really thought about that side of it before.
Yeah, because pirates, they don't really leave much of a trace because they don't want to be caught by the law, so they
Exactly.
really challenging.
Yeah, no, he was very much, he had an island that was his hideout sort of thing, but the island was very protective and hard to get into, and he put his hut underneath a sort of canopy of trees, so that even from the highest hill you couldn't see the hut, and so he was very careful to keep himself hidden, which makes it hard for people who want to write about him. It's an exciting story, but yeah, I just had to work harder to get to the facts.
You do a lot of workshops with younger kids. Has there been any super embarrassing or just awkward or moments or questions that you can or really want to share with us?
There's one that always stands out because I just laughed so much when I read it. But when someone like me, this one first won the or not only then, now even they do it, but once it won the Children's Book of the Year award, teachers would be reading it to their class, and then they would get the class, because I advertise on my website that I'm happy to answer kids' letters, they would get their class to write letters after she'd read them the book, or he'd read them the book. I'd get 25 letters on my email, all from kids in year 5 or year 4 or something, which is fine, and I always send them individual answers. But this one kid sticks in my mind because his letter came last on the pile, last on the list, and it was very short, and all it said was, "I really liked it when our teacher read your book to the class or to us. But why did you have to write such a boring story?" I know that was my exact reaction. Why did you have to write such a boring story?
Well, that's unexpected.
Yeah.
It's just like I love it that my teacher read this out, but why is it boring? It's like,
that's right. Why did you have to write such a boring story? Mind you, the grab line on the cover here says, I have to remind myself what it says now. This is an ordinary kid. Oh, Taz. Taz is the name of the character. Taz is an ordinary kid, but what happens to him this year is anything but ordinary. Now, saying he's an ordinary kid might have been the clue. The kid who wrote to me probably hadn't actually read the book for himself, so he might have been picking up on the cover grab rather than the book, but I just thought it was hilarious that he would write that.
Now we are on to the speed questions.
Aha!
This is where it got super long on one of my interviews. But what are you writing at the moment?
Aha! Now I've got a little list here where I've tried to make them concise and not go wobbling on. At the moment, I'm writing another historical fiction.
Ooh.
And it's about a real life pioneer aviator, Australian pioneer aviator, who hardly anybody knows about, and yet he flew with Smithy across the Pacific, across the Tasman, around Australia. These were all first. No one had ever done it before, and he and Smithy did it together. And everyone knows about Smithy, but this is Charles Ulm, and hardly anyone knows about Charles Ulm. And yet he was the co-pilot, the navigator, not the navigator, no, he was never that. He was the businessman behind all the flights, because it takes a lot of organising. Here I am waffling again. I was only supposed to tell you that it was an aviator, so...
Okay.
Anyway.
You had a bit of story behind it.
Yes. I've only just started, and Fremantle Press are going to look at it, or they have looked at it and said yes, they like it. But I don't know what it's called yet.
It's always hard picking the name.
Yes, that's very hard. Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing.
What's your favourite ice cream flavour? This is totally random, but I need to know.
That's fine. This will be short. Burnt caramel.
Burnt caramel?
Yeah.
I have
know,
sweet
that's
caramel.
it's a weird favourite, but then I'm a bit weird anyway.
Caramel's one of my favourite things, so I need to try this.
Yes.
It's going on my list.
It's just a bit more intense. Anyway, that's all that.
Which book character do you or have you previously had a crush on?
I can't think of any that I've actually had a crush on. There have been characters but mainly I get hooked on the story. So the characters, there are lots of them that I like, and very few that I don't like. Even the baddies I sometimes like. But yeah, I couldn't think of one. So I've just answered none.
Well, that's perfectly fine.
Good.
What was your worst subject in school?
Maths.
Same. Same.
End of subject. End of discussion.
Maths. Who is your favourite or most inspirational author?
There's a guy in England who was writing when I was in my 20s and 30s, I think, or even younger. And his name's Alan Garner, and you might not have heard of him, but he wrote the most brilliant stories because somehow he managed to walk that fine line between reality and fiction, so that sometimes you didn't know whether it was reality you were in or fiction you were in, and it was almost as if he stepped one foot either side of this line all the way, and it just made them so well, sometimes they were terribly scary. There was one point when I was at home on my own, And I'm not scared of the dark or anything. I grew up in the country and I'm not scared of many things. But I was reading this book, and the way he described this event where the two worlds had rubbed up against each other, the fiction world and the reality world had rubbed up against each other, and any minute now they're going to break through. The people from one side are going to break through into the other side, and the fantasy side was on the porch of the house where the real people lived, and coming around, you know, like you see sometimes in movies, burglars come around and look in at the windows and things like that and make little noises. And I actually got up out of my chair and went and locked the door. It was so real, it was so scary.
I've done that a couple times too. Yes.
Oh, I'm glad I'm not that crazy. I'm not, you know, so crazy that no one else would do that.
Well, I mean, there were just some of those books that just really make you feel what's going on in there, and those are the type of books where you go, this person is a brilliant writer to be able to do this.
Exactly, that's what I thought, and I still think. But he's stopped writing now. I haven't seen anything new from him for years and years and years.
Do you prefer reading ebooks or hard books?
I love ebooks if I'm travelling, if I'm on a plane, if I've got luggage, if I'm, you know, away from home. But when I'm at home in my own chair, give me a paperback, a hardback, give me a hard copy anytime. I don't like to read my ebook in the chair.
Yes. I prefer hard books too.
Yeah.
Got to feel the paper.
Yeah, I think they're more comfortable too. If you're in your own chair, you want to be comfortable. If you're sitting in a plane, you know you're going to be uncomfortable anyway.
So you may as well.
Yeah, you may as well, that's right. Yep, exactly.
What is the weirdest place or thing you've gotten inspiration from for your writing?
Probably Miss Llewellyn Jones's clothesline. A clothesline, here it is here. A whole lot of washing on a clothesline. Now, how about that for inspiration? And of course, they all fly away. So, yeah, that's a bit different.
That's pretty cool. Do you remember the first book you ever read? Or if not, what's your favourite childhood book you love to read?
I do remember the first book I ever read. It was probably the same. It probably was my favourite at the time. Oops, that's going to fall down and everything else is going to fall, so let's just bring it down here somewhere.
There we go.
There we go, yeah. Yeah, I remember it vividly. It had this rosy-cheeked girl on the cover with her pigtails all sticking out, and her name was Popsy. My mother kept it for years and years and years at home, and I don't know whether I've still got it at my house now that my mother's dead, but I used to demand this book every night. My family would patiently read it to me, and one day I discovered I could read it myself, and I was so thrilled that I could at last read this book that I loved and read it for myself. So yeah, Popsy is very clear in my memory.
What do you see as your biggest achievement so far in life?
Well, even thinking back to my teaching career and my other careers, and I still think that winning the Children's Book of the Year award was the most significant and certainly the most exciting and unexpected, I guess. That's why it was so good.
Well, I mean, it's a really, really awesome award.
That's right, yeah.
Do you have any advice for young writers?
Certainly I do, yes. I'm often asked this question, so I have it down pat pretty much. If you want to be a writer, the first thing you have to do is read, and read some more. And then you have to write. So don't mess around, just get into it. Write, and write. And doesn't matter what you're writing, you can write emails, letters, stories, shopping lists, anything. Just keep reading and keep writing.
Beautiful advice. Thank you so much for letting me interview you. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Hermione. It's been great to meet you and chat to you. And yes, I hope we meet again sometime.
I hope so too. Make sure to follow Elaine on her social media and make sure to like and share this video so we can share Elaine and her incredible collection of books.
Thank you.